All right, we're picking up now in section 9 of the tutorial document. And as you can see, the focus on this particular section is on this MVC component called filters. And filters are actually a special type of code that we add to our controllers that allow us to control, in some cases, what happens before and after a controller method is triggered. So basically it's giving us a further programmatic control over our application. Some of the types of filters that we will work with will fall into these categories here. So you can see that we can control our output cache, how we handle an error, if something is authorized to access a certain part of an application. And these types of filters are based upon these categories, and you can see that we can actually trigger certain actions to happen. And some of them are done intentionally and automatically to really make our lives a whole lot easier. What they do in essence is they give us kind of like a short code approach to being able to do certain actions without having to write all the code that goes with it. Now, at first it's a little uncomfortable because it's like, great, more syntax to learn. But when you get comfortable with the syntax, you'll see how easy it is to like deny somebody access to like a certain web page based upon whether they're authorized or not. So let's scroll down a little bit here and start doing the steps in the tutorial. So the first step here is, of course, to open up Visual Studio and create a new project. So this goes off to my second screen as per normal. So let's go ahead and create a new project. And of course we do want to be in the ASP.NET, the C# section under web, and then we do want to build ASP.NET web application with a .NET framework. All right, so once you've made that selection, let's go ahead and change the name of the project. And they would like us to call this MVC Filters Demo. And then I need to be mindful of where I'm storing this because I do not want to store it locally. I want to put it out in the cloud so that I can get to it from any one of my machines. And you can do the same if you wish. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. On this next screen, we want to select empty as the project type. We do want to put in folder references for MVC. And then once you have those selections made, you guys can go ahead and click OK. It's going to take a minute to build out the project, so we'll let it do its work. All right, so the project is built out. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go right to the controllers folder, right-click, and add a controller. So here we want to select empty, which has kind of been our pattern here. So go ahead and do that and click Add. And the controller that we're going to create is the home controller, so go ahead and title that. Click Add. All right, now that the product went ahead and created the home controller for us, now we're going to do some tweaks in here to kind of demonstrate some of the things that filters do. Now, the code that we're about to add is going to be placed within square brackets, and you can see that on the top of page 47. In fact, all they're really doing here is Well, let me do this kind of like in a non-sequential fashion. First of all, they're changing the index method to a string method. So you guys should know that that means that we're going to return a string down here. And just type in something that indicates what we're doing. And the book says this is an ASP.NET MVC filters tutorial. I'm going to truncate that a little bit. But just so we know that it is triggering properly. Now the filter part of it is the part I'm just about to add. And what they're doing here is right above the action method in square brackets. And my pattern is, not curly's, is to type the opening and the closing one right away. That's just the way I prefer to work. Notice there's no semicolon at the end of the statement. And inside these square brackets, I'm going to put in this directive. I'm going to say output cache. That's the command that we want. And then in parentheses, duration equals 15. All right, so refresh my memory, you guys. What is a cache? Aside from that money in your pocket. When I refer to a cache, what am I referring to? All right, it's a temporary storage spot, right? So if you think of like a browser cache, the browser will often store recently visited pages, JavaScript, images, so that when you go to pull something up again and it realizes it's the same one, it hasn't changed, instead of downloading it from the internet, it just pulls it up from the repository. Or if you have a cache of food, what do you have? You have a temporary little storage of food that you can pull from as you need. In this case, when we're referring to an output cache, what would you guess that refers to? Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of holding on to something for us, and apparently for the duration of 15, whatever 15 is. So the question is, what does that actually do? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to have this cache kind of store a value temporarily for us for a duration of 15. Now, what's 15? 15 seconds, 15 milliseconds, 15 minutes? How long is that? Well, it doesn't really specify, does it? Not yet. That's right. At this point, the tutorial is asking us to run what we already have. So let's go ahead and actually do that. Run what we already have. Of course, my browser's consistently coming up in the second screen again. Now, you have to remember this is in the home controller in the index method. So it should just load up that message that we typed in saying that this is a filters tutorial or whatever you typed in. Okay, and hopefully you have that. All right, so now that's all they wanted us to do there. There was a reason for that. The next thing that they want us to do in the same controller is add another action method. So we're going to add right down here, right below the index method, another one, and we're going to actually add another output cache. So you know what, why don't we just copy this one and place it here. This time let's change that duration to 20. Public string, and they want this one to be called get current time, parens, and curly brackets. Inside there, we're going to put in a little call to the system clock, and we're going to call datetime dot now dot to string. And then inside the parens here, we're going to put in a letter T, and at the end of the line, a semicolon. You guys all have that typed in? You good? All right, so they do want us to run it again. So I'm going to save my work and do a run. And as this loads up, it's going to first take us to the index method, which brings up this silly little text. Now they would like us to append home, that's our controller, / the name of the other method we just added, which is get current time. If I press enter, it hits the system clock, and notice the time listed. Okay, 7 o'clock and 16 seconds. If you do a refresh, I just did it. Notice that it's not refreshing. But if I count to 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1001, 1002, green 89, or whatever Aaron Rodgers says, we wait 20 seconds. So let's see if it's 20 seconds. Somebody counting for me? It's probably about 15. So let's count down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This should have been 20 seconds by now. So if I refresh, now I get the updated time. But if I refresh again, you can see my little refresh going. See how it's not updating it? So what it's doing is it's caching the output for 20 seconds. Right? So you can use this to kind of programmatically control stuff that happens on the screen. You don't necessarily, just because a person's impatient on something and is refreshing, you might want to keep them from like hitting your server, hitting your database, and reloading content when it's not really necessary. That's what an output cache does. And that's kind of a simplistic example. All right, so the next little part that we're going to try here, you can go ahead and close your browser, is bottom of page 49. We're going to look at creating a custom filter. So you can actually create your own, which is kind of a fun little thing to do. So very bottom of page 49, they have a little directive here that says add one class for which right-click on action filters and select add class. So let's go ahead and do that. Now it doesn't really seem like a step because it's not labeled as a step, but it's right at the bottom of 49, and it's an easy one to miss. So first step, folks, is we need to create a new folder. So highlight the root of your project, the one with the bold name, not the solution at the very top, but the second one down. Give it a right click and add a new folder. This folder is going to be called Action Filters. Go ahead, press enter to lock it in. And then give that a right click. Go ahead and add a class. Now, for my dialog, class is listed at the very bottom. It hypothetically should be for you too. If not, you'll have to go into the new item and find class. But this is basically going to create a new C# file for us. And they do want us to call this my log action filter. When you got that typed in, go ahead and click add. And there's your new empty class file in the action filters folder. All right, in order to make this public action filter work, what we need to do is add some code. So we have like the core code already included here, but what we're going to do is we're going to add the code that's listed at the bottom of page 50 onto page 51. And there's quite a bit of code here to add, so I want you to be really careful and methodical about doing it. In fact, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be copy pasting stuff from my PDF. It's going to be easier than typing it all in. And I want to encourage the people here in the classroom to do the same, because otherwise we'll be waiting a while for you to type it in. But if you've already typed it in, that's wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to begin by first adding the code that's within the curly braces in the actual class itself. So between these curly braces here, just create a little space. And the first thing we're going to add in is a method, and this spans 2 pages, so I have to copy paste in 2 fell swoops here. So I'm going to add my curlies manually and then copy in the code. Now what we're basically doing here is we are creating kind of a log file system of sorts. So notice that we have this command, and it's indicating this doesn't exist in the current context. That's because we haven't added the appropriate libraries yet. But you'll notice that if you hover over these error messages, on occasion you will get little hints as to what you can do to fix it. And notice that one thing that we do need to do is we do need to add some libraries to get this to work. So notice as I hover over this and then click that little box, and let me show you how I did that again. So I'm hovering over the underlined item, and you guys might be familiar with this in Java more so than the .NET environment, but they have this link here that's right there, or they have the little drop down, or you can hit Alt-Enter or Control+, any one of those, to get the list of suggested fixes. So this one here, the Using System Web MVC, is a library we do need to add. And as I add it, notice what happens. The underline goes away because we just added the piece we needed. On this particular library here, well, I guess I'm not worried about that one. It doesn't give me any quick fixes, so I'm just going to leave it for right now. It sounds kind of lame, but that's what I'm doing. Moving on to the next method. And this one's called onActionExecuted. I'm just going to copy and paste in the whole thing and then clean it up in the aftermath. So the format coming over from the copy paste isn't quite as clean as I would like, but it is what it is, so we are just going to work with it. Notice how the log file also has a library that it wants. So I'm going to hover over log. Let's take a look at the potential fixes and see if any of these make any sense. Well, you know what? Not quite yet. Let's not add anything yet. Does this box here give us a different list? No. So we're going to leave that alone for right now. But I'm thinking, if this is indicating that if I choose this first option here, that it also adds a library for routing, and I scroll back up in my document, and then I notice, wow, this does need the routing library. Maybe that first one is the fix. So let's go ahead and try that for log. Yes. System Web MVC was the one I chose for that particular option. Now, I want you to notice that as I put that routing piece in, it also added this log method. And if you notice, if you go to the very bottom of the code that we're copying, that is actually present there. So it's not a mistake. But I will tell you right now that the stuff that's inside the curly brackets, we are going to change. So I'm going to keep pressing forward here. And instead of copying the methods over one at a time, at this point I'm going to grab a couple and paste them in. And I'm going to put them right in between here. And yes, I'm trying to clean this up so it looks like what's in the book, because I think that's helpful when it looks like that. Maybe wastes a little bit of space, but it's not really so bad. And then for the log method at the bottom, you'll notice that there's some different stuff being dealt with here. So the first thing that I'm noticing is that this string name right here is changed. So in the book, they're using method name in that spot. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in. Like so. The route data, that's fine. But then all the stuff inside the curly brackets here for this log method is completely different. And yes, I realize that there's a throw statement here. We're not really worried about the exceptions too much at this point. But I am worried about adding in these variables, the messages, and then you see how I'm kind of separating them out on separate lines. You see that's one long line, so I'm just kind of leaving it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out what other libraries I might be missing that will prevent the error messages that are popping up right now. And the only difference that I'm seeing, and actually I only see one, and that is this particular library. So I'm going to add this one in. So it's not in the same order as what you see in the book. But that diagnostics library should help to get rid of some of the underlines. And now I'm noticing that this one is still underlining. So I'm trying to figure out why that's doing that. I'm going to do a save for starters. All right. And as usual, one of my students finds it before I do. And he noticed that the MyLog action filter extends the action filter attribute class. And then by just simply adding that, the underlines go away. It's a very good catch, Ryan. Folks, go ahead and save this. Now what this is in essence going to do, you guys, it's going to go ahead and it's going to start to log all the actions that happen relative to all the different controllers that we're running. But before we can make this actually do something for us, we need to make sure that we have that filter activated in the controller that we want to use. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go back to the home controller now. And in order to log what's happening in this application, we're going to add a filter directive up here at the top where we're going to call in what we just created. Now that is underlining red, and I'm a little confused as to why. So I'm just checking my spelling here. So let's see if we need to do a using statement. Right, so you guys are already catching the process here. So what we're doing now is the class file that we just created, in order for the home controller to use it, we're pulling it in as an external resource like we would a system library. But the difference is we created it. It wasn't a pre-generated item. So I'm going to go ahead and use that using statement. And then you can see the underline goes away. But what this in essence will do is it will log things. Now I'm noticing I already put it in the wrong spot. You guys catching that? Right? Because it's not going to log, if I place it here, it's going to log what happens in this first method. What I really want it to do is actually to log everything in the home controller, so I'm going to put it here. So you're catching the procedure here? It sits above the method or block of code that you're working with. All right. Now, you don't really see the result of what's going on with this until you run the application and then monitor the output window at the bottom of Visual Studio. So that's exactly what I'm going to do, is I'm going to launch this. All right, and I'm waiting for the browser to come up, and here it is. I'm just going to kind of keep this off to the side here and let it load up its stuff. I know it's going to take a moment. I hope yours is not taking as long as mine. So it finally did load up, and what they wanted us to do is take a look at the output window. And right now, in this like server mode, the output window doesn't show. You actually have to come up down here and trigger it. And in fact, if you want, of course, you can like rearrange all this stuff. But anytime you do something in the application, the action filter log will log it to the console output. And if you can log it to the console output, you could also log it to a text file. And so really what you're doing is you're creating this tool that's able to monitor what's going on your website and keep record of it, which is a very common thing to do on web servers. Now, one thing that we could try here is we could go to this home get current time thing and see if it logs that. And you notice what happened in the output window as I did that? Now I'm going to try to refresh. And then, of course, I can go back and go back to home. And every time I do something here, you guys will notice that the output window will update as long as it's related to the home controller. If I went to a different controller, it wouldn't log it because we didn't put that there. So you see the difference? And of course, you can customize it and tweak it. You can put in conditionals. You can run all sorts of logic behind it. All right, if you got that to work and you're getting the output window to respond to behaviors in the home controller, you've completed section 9. So I'm now going to move us on to section 10, which is going to get me to pull this document back over here. I'm going to stop the server from running and switch back over to the document. All right, the thing that we're going to learn about next is a thing called selectors. And what selectors basically allow us to do is help us control which methods are being triggered by the URL. So like we kind of have redirects where we go to a certain spot and we can get bounced to somewhere else, we also have selectors which can help us select from the different methods in a controller. So instead of redirecting us to a different page, kind of really guide us towards specific methods depending on whatever logic you're using. So maybe there's like a value you type in, or maybe if you log in and you click a certain box, it might trigger something that takes you somewhere else. So that's kind of the thought here. It says there's 3 types of action selector attributes, so action name, non-action, and action verbs. And what that means for us basically is that we can put in code that says one thing but triggers something else. It's kind of like the redirect. I mean, it's really kind of the best example I have as a correlation. So the code that they're showing here on page 54 is they're showing the controller that we already had, right? So from the last chapter, looking at the home controller that has 2 action methods. And now, notice how I highlight that because I don't think it's very clear sometimes when they tell you to do something. How they come in and they change that now to say action name. Now that does necessitate the fact that we remove all the other stuff to get this to work. So let's try that. Let's go ahead and go into the application. Hopefully you've screenshotted everything at this point so you don't have to redo it to do your screenshots. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to remove, do we have to remove the logging? Yeah, that could actually stay. Do we want to remove the output cache? I think so. We'll get rid of that. What they do want us to put in here instead is this little selector, which looks just like a filter, right? Square brackets and everything. And notice action name current time. So what is that telling you? That means instead of typing get current time, I can just say current time and it still will work. That, I mean, in essence, is what it's going to do. So if you go ahead and run the application now, which I'm going to do, once again, second screen, you see the logging is working in the background there. I'll let this load up. And then we're going to type home, and not get current time, but just current time in the format that we added in the action name. And then you see that it brings it up. Now I did remove the filter for the output cache. So I mean so if I refresh it, will give me the current time every time I refresh. But you see that it did actually kind of trick the URL, and it's not really tricking it, we're programming it to type in a name that's different than the method, but still take us to that method. So if I came in here and changed this to say, you know, bacon, it would take us to the current time if I typed bacon in the URL. That's kind of the example here. So pretty simplistic, but powerful nonetheless. All right, so another component that we can play with is this thing called non-action. And we're going to make a couple of tweaks here. So you notice the stuff that I highlighted in yellow, these are the tweaks that we're making to the code. So I'm going to pull this over to my second screen. I'll make the tweaks and you guys can follow along. So in that get current time method, instead of doing date time now to string, we are just running a method called time string, which of course we don't have yet, so we're going to create that. And I don't know if you guys know this, but if you show potential fixes for this problem, of course one of the fixes is to actually generate the method. So you can actually generate the method automatically, which is pretty slick, right? You guys knew that you can do that? Like you can name a method, not have it created, hover, click, and auto-create it. You can do the same with most Java tools. It does put in an exception handler if we do not choose to actually add something in here. And then we're going to type in the same code we had before with a little text added to it. Time is, and then we're going to concatenate to it the whole date, time, dot now, to string, and then in the format of time. So in this case, we're actually running a method. Now that you guys have made the edits, let's go ahead and launch the application one more time. Get that browser up and running, which I'm pulling back over. And we'll let that load up. And then our goal, of course, is now to go to current time again. Yes, I did change the text there. And we're going to go to home, current time. Now, you guys tell me what happened, because we put in non-action. What is that doing in our code? Or did I even put that in? No, I don't think I did either. In fact, I know I didn't. But you do see that without putting it in, it worked just fine. Correct? So you think I did that by accident? You know, sometimes it is accidental, right? But now I'm putting in non-action. So you tell me, if I run it now, what's going to happen before it happens? What does non-action say to you? All right, let's see if we're right. Because obviously omitting it still took us to current time. Okay, so you're noticing the other change too. Okay. So the other thing that Ryan is noticing is here we're calling this a private. In the book, they're calling it a public. Should that make a difference? Well, this is a private method available only to the applications, right? You can't change the code while the program's running. But let's go ahead and make that change and see if there's any difference here. So I'm changing that to public. And really all that means, folks, is when you're running a block of code like that and you switch it to public, now it's accessible to classes and methods that are outside of this class. Where with a private designation, it's only available to this class. That's the difference. So let's go ahead and run that one more time. All right, here comes my browser again. All right, we'll bring up our famous URL here. Still pulling up the time. Now, if we try to directly pull up the time string method by name, guess what? We can't do it. That's really the point of this example. So by putting non-action in front of a method, that means it cannot be invoked by the URL. The only pathway to it is from other code inside that same class. That's what we're demonstrating here. All right, that's all we have time for tonight. Next week, we're going to pick up right here with action verbs and finish up the chapter. I know that the assignment is due before next week. I understand that. So what you guys, if you need support with it video-wise, please go ahead and watch the videos from last semester where we walk through exactly the same thing. And hopefully you won't have any problems, but I will demonstrate at the beginning of next class finishing this up, and then we'll move into sections 11 and 12.